My name is Anthony Maglieri. I'm running for the Kendall County Board, and as part of my series on solar power, renewable energy, and trying to find sustainable solutions for Kendall County, I've invited the Independence Renewable Energy guys here. I've got Norm and Ray here with me today, and we're going to chat about private solar installations. I've talked previously about government solar. I'll do a couple videos on community solar options and private solar options for residents and business. And I don't believe there is actual residential solar installer technically in Kendall County, but these guys are located in Sandwich, Illinois, directly abutting Kendall County, and I'm sure they do a lot of work here in Kendall County. So I wanted to give them the opportunity to introduce themselves, talk a little bit about what they do and residential solar options for people in Kendall County, and then we'll go into maybe looking at some plans as far as what the different options are from roof mount and ground mount and so on and so forth. So Norm, Ray, thanks for joining me here. Go ahead and introduce yourself, guys.
You're welcome, Anthony. Thanks for having us. Yeah, my name is Norman Johnson, owner, operator of Independence Renewable Energy based in Sandwich, Illinois. We've been installing solar in the Northern Illinois area since early Q1 2010. So kind of before the boom hit, we got going on the ground level and have been happily serving the community.
Great, and go ahead. And I understand I talked to some IBEW guys, and your history is like working in electrical union. Is that right, Norm?
Yeah, I have a background in commercial electrical construction, and then a little over 10 years ago, I decided to change gears a little bit and focus on solar.
And how have you been enjoying that change?
Well, being an independent small business owner comes with its challenges for sure. We started out of the living room of my home, made a big move to the bedroom of my home, and then a few years after that to a small office here in Sandwich, and then about a year and a half ago, we're in the location we are now at 926 East Church Street with a little combination office space and shop area. So it's been working out very well.
And you go by the nickname of the Solar Professor, is that right?
We started out that way, and it was kind of a fun thing to put together. For those who have lived in the area a long time, may remember or be aware of the Empire Carpet Guy.
588-2300, right?
Yeah, exactly. So when we set out to kind of brand it a little bit, we wanted to be the would-be Empire Carpet Guy of the solar world. So he ran his course a little bit, and when we started to grow, he's still out there, and he's got some presence on our vehicles and some of our materials and that, but we kind of streamlined and modernized a little bit just into the IRE with our new logo and new color scheme.
Independence renewable energy. And I think that is an attraction to a lot of people, just having the ability to be independent. Like, I think when this pandemic was first hitting, I was thinking to myself, like, what happens, like, you've never been in a situation like this, and your mind starts racing, like, what happens if I can't get water or gas or electricity and I can't go outside? There's nobody doing these things. Well, if I had solar panels on my house, at least one part of that could be assuaged a little bit. And it was just an interesting thought. I like how you kind of integrated that into the name as well.
Yeah, and that was, and certainly that was long before a pandemic, but the idea with the name of Independence being in the name was just that, kind of like grid freedom, and an independent feeling to running more aspects of your life.
So Norm, if you were the solar professor, then Ray, you would be the solar soothsayer, is that right?
Yeah, that would be right, I guess. My name is Ray Miner. I'm responsible for solar energy consulting, and I basically work with people that are interested in solar energy, talk about what it is they really want to accomplish with the installation of solar energy. I analyze their current usage, and then I come up with a system design that will help them offset, in a lot of cases 100%, but not at all in cases. They get some cases where people don't want to necessarily offset all of it. And so I basically design it to what they want to do, and then we put it all together, and Norm and his team install them, and on we go.
Got it. Yeah, I met one of your installers. He was out here to my property earlier this year, kind of giving me a survey and looking it over, and you guys came up with kind of a budgetary quote. We can talk about that towards the end of the call, but he was really nice. How many other people are on your staff? Is it that installer, you, Norm, and Ray?
Yeah, well, we right, like most construction businesses, we bounce around a little bit. So we're anywhere typically between 6 and 8 folks, depending on how much work we have going on in the field.
Got it. And has 2020, I know, so I've been following solar for a long time. I've been really looking forward to a point in my life where I could have a solar installation on my property. I'm excited that I might soon be there. But just following it for so long, watching the price of panels come down and trying to decide for myself when is the right time. All these kind of government rebates that have gone on. I know last year what they were higher, and this year you might talk about that later. And then next year, I think, is one of the last years before they phase out. But there was also a tariff on solar panels that got implemented in 2016 as well. So that kind of had an impact. And I'd love for you to chat a little bit about those things, or if that's part of what you want to present to us, Norm, then I'll just let you go ahead.
We'll touch on incentives and stuff as we go through the presentation, but kind of we've seen truly over the last almost 2 years, the price of panels themselves, which is still the majority of the cost to installing solar, is pretty much stabilized. They'll move around, a penny or two per watt here and there, but the good, solid working horse panels are remaining fairly stable. So the big thing that they're working on driving down is what they call soft costs. So, cost of customer acquisition, permitting, things like that are areas that can be addressed. But, the inverters, the panels, the racking, all those things, they're kind of run, again, with construction. When there's high demand and material costs go up, they're going to bump up a little bit. As they ramp up manufacturing, you might see the cost come down a little bit just because of economics of scale. But again, the overall costs have been pretty stable now for about 2 years.
Okay, great. And you guys 2020 has been a busier year, or not as busy with the pandemic, or how has it really impacted your business?
Well, Ray, maybe you can speak to that a little bit. How did 2020 start compared to where we've been for a while now?
I will tell you that between the combination of the 26% federal tax credit that was in effect last year if you bought solar, and the incentives in Illinois that were available, we had a absolute banner year last year. Having said that, there is a huge amount of interest in solar now. I will say that probably the buying has not been as strong this year as last, but there has been significantly more interest this year than last year from people that have been doing the research and want to do something, and got a handful of them that are out there just waiting to see how this whole coronavirus plays out before they make a decision going forward.
Got it. Okay, great. Well, Norm or Ray, if one of you guys wants to share your screen and maybe show us some of the information that you wanted to present to us today before we get into the Q&A portion.
Can you see what I got going here? Wait a minute. I got to hit share my screen, and forgive me, I'm a little bit. It's
all right. You'll learn the Zoom ways.
All right. Can you see that?
Yes, it looks great.
All right. Now let me see here if I can get rid of the. Okay, I think we're in business now, right?
Fantastic.
Sure. Okay, so we do a number of presentations. Well, through the years, we've done a number of presentations, whether they've been at libraries and other public events like that. So we've had these presentations kind of at the ready, if you will, just edited for a specific area or things, and I trimmed the fat a little bit on this one so we could move through it. So really, we talk about, through all this information, kind of figuring out if solar is right for you. And a little general information, scientifically anyway, that every day the sun provides enough energy to power our world for an entire year. It just becomes a matter of how to best capture that energy and then put it to use. Then on an individual basis, are you claiming your share of that available power? Again, looking at the world back from statistics from 2017, roughly only 17% of our energy sources are coming from renewable sources. A lot of it from down at the bottom there, you'll see natural gas, coal, nuclear, renewables, and then petroleum and other. I'm sure that by now, these last few years, that has tipped up a couple of percentage points. Most states, including Illinois, have what they call our renewable portfolio standards, which set into motion regulations that state a certain amount of the energy used within the state has to come from renewable energy sources, and that's what drives a lot of the incentives that you see throughout Illinois and throughout the country. But no doubt that the renewable train has left the station, it's not going back. So through the years, we're going to continue to see this number climb. Big question that people have that we talk to all the time is, does solar work in Illinois? A lot of people get hung up on the idea that we have, pretty severe winters sometimes, and a lot of cloudy days in the spring, and even last couple of days like today and yesterday, a lot of rain and overcast today. when you're thinking about going solar, you got to think of the long game. And this truly is what this is about. You look at this graphic here. This is pulled down from PV Watts. You can Google that very easily. And it's part of the Department of National Renewable Energy Laboratory. So they've compiled roughly 100 years worth of weather data. So just by telling it your zip code and a few other parameters, it'll tell you how much available sunlight there is in a given area, and then how that ties into how much energy can be produced. And this system is about an average residential system, maybe 5 kW rating. And then on the solar radiation, you can see that in January, 2.88 hours of usable sunlight, through the midsummer months of 6.2, 6.4, and then back down as the sun, changes position in the sky, and then correlating energy production. So roughly 4.77 hours of usable sunlight every day on average. That takes into account snowy days, rainy days, overcast, and all kinds of different things. Then that ties into this. This is a comparison of the same kilowatt rated system of energy that would be produced if it was sitting in Miami, Florida, or here in Sandwich, Illinois. And you look down at the bottom, that if the system were in Miami, Florida, it would be roughly 7,700 kilowatt hours, and here in Sandwich, 6,700 kilowatt hours. So about a difference of about 14%. When you look at the bar graph, you'll see that starting at the end of May through June, July, August, and into September, actually the system in Sandwich, Illinois will outproduce the one in Miami. The skies in Miami are have a lot more haze coming off the ocean during the summer months. So in the summertime, our skies are much clearer. Consequently, we get better solar energy production here. But then in the winter and fall, spring and fall months, they're going to outproduce us in Miami. So this is a nice tool to clarify to people that, yeah, just because we don't live in the South or out in the desert Southwest, that solar energy is still viable here in the northern Midwest. Another comparison that people like to see is the comparison of the United States solar availability versus Germany. When you keep in mind that for years, Germany was the world leader in solar energy installations. And when you look from a climate standpoint, most of Germany is more like our Seattle. And when you think about Seattle, most people think about rain, and a lot of it. So again, Germany was able to pull it off based on production numbers in a much cloudier, rainier climate. And then when you look at here in the Midwest by the Great Lakes, our solar availability is much greater than that of Germany.
So Norm, one of my takeaways when I see slides like this is just that, whether or not, you're in the ideal spot, or even, we'll talk later, I'm sure, about south-facing roofs versus east or west, and what the ideal angle is here in Kendall County to put your panels at throughout the year. But it's a lot of it's just like, hey, if you're not perfect, you can just make up for it by just adding a few more panels, right?
Yeah, no doubt. And
that's what Germany does, right?
Sure. And that was really the game changer, 10, 12 years ago, when solar energy panel production ramped up globally, therefore driving down the cost. So it's exactly to your point, where 12 years ago, having to compensate with an extra 5 to 6 panels would have been exponentially more costly than it is today. And that's what really flipped the switch on less than ideal areas being able to really take advantage of solar energy. So in a very rudimentary explanation here, this graphic, and you can see the arrow moving. The solar panels generate DC energy coming off your roof or on the ground or wherever they may sit when they're exposed to the sun. That DC energy flows down into the inverter. The inverter converts that DC energy to the 240 volt AC energy that we all use in our home. Then the inverter then pushes the power typically into your electrical panel. And at that point, it is either self-consumed. If there's demand in your home for all of the solar energy that's being produced, it will be consumed at the time of production within your home. And then any excess is exported from your electrical panel out through your meter and back to the grid. And then there's a program called net metering, which allows in essence, your electric meter to spin backwards. And then you get credit for that excess energy on your bill. Then you're allowed to use those credits before you have to buy power from the utility company. So
Yeah,
that's how over the course of a year, you can actually attain a net zero energy bill if your system is sized accordingly.
one of the best ways I've heard this described is basically just using the power company as a large battery, right? You're just charging up that battery when you have excess. It's not actually, and you're not charging a battery, you're charging your account, right? So you're getting credits on your account for when you have excess, and you spend those at night and in the winter months.
Yeah,
Is that
no
right?
doubt. You know, the one thing that we are a little bit wary when you say the word battery to people. A lot of times they think then that
Virtual
they have
battery.
access. Yeah, that battery for backup power. So yeah, storage bank, you know, excess battery. But yeah, you're right. The utility company stores your excess power for you until you need it. And this is probably a good time to mention this. And this is what's called a grid connected system. So its sole purpose is to reduce and consequently offset the amount of power that you consume from the grid. With these type of systems, there is no backup power in the event of a utility outage. In order for that to happen, you do need some sort of on-site storage medium, you know, typically a battery bank that then would take over when the grid power went out.
If the grid power was down in this scenario and it was July and it was noon, would I feel it? Or would I still be able to operate?
No, the inverters by code have to send stable grid power in order to engage. So as soon as the grid fluctuates or goes out, the what's called anti-islanding circuitry within the inverter automatically disconnects from the grid and stops all power from flowing to your electric panel until stable grid power is available again, and then the inverters automatically re-engage and start producing power.
There's
So
a more elaborate way to get that to work with a battery or some other type of, is there a way to get that to go? Independence, renewable energy, right?
Yeah, absolutely. If you, you know, the next step to this, if you will, would be grid connected with battery backup. So you would engage, you would also install a battery bank, and then within that system would be a little bit more elaborate switching. The best way to explain it is kind of like a transfer switch if you had a standby generator. So in that case, you would have your battery bank that would also feed into the inverter, but then another switch between you and the grid, that when the power went out, that switch would disconnect you from your grid, engage the batteries, and then you could power your home through the batteries. Once the grid returns, the intelligence of the system would turn the switch back to grid power, disengage your batteries, and then life goes on as normal.
So in that scenario, when the grid is disconnected, you're still not able to use the solar on your roof. You're only using your batteries. Is that right?
No, there are systems now that is, if the sun is shining, their primary purpose would be to keep your batteries charged. So as your batteries are discharging and they reach a certain level, if there is a solar resource out there, the solar will continue to pump power back into your batteries to extend the lifespan of your batteries during that outage.
So you're kind of so in that situation, you'd be charging and discharging your battery at the same time.
Exactly. Right.
We also have a number of customers, Anthony, that put in generators as a backup source for solar that automatically engage in the event that they lose power from the grid.
You know, that's site-specific stuff, right? What are the people trying to accomplish? How much load are they trying to carry? What's their budget like? You know, we talk about all those things. But yeah, Anthony, in order to, if you're just have solar without a standby generator, either natural gas or propane, in order to have power during an outage, you have to have a battery system. There are no systems that can convert solar energy to usable AC energy in your home without that battery medium in between.
Okay.
So now we kind of get into the components a little bit. We're talking about solar panels right out of the gate, and there's really two kind of technologies for the cells. It's a monocrystalline or polycrystalline, and that's the you know, the different manufacturing properties that they put into the cells that are inside the panels.
And a lot of
And
people
then-
like the all black ones, right? And that's the mono, is that right?
Yeah, all black, yeah, that's one way to distinguish them. If it's an all black panel, it's going to be a mono panel. There are some mono panels that have more of this bluish hue to them, but the all blacks are definitely mono. And yeah, aesthetically, the all black panel has really become the leader all over the place. Because when you put them up on the roof, they look more like just a big skylight up there. So depending on your roof color, orientation of how you face, a lot of people like that. Out by us, we have a lot of rural areas up on barns, metal roofs and things like that. In a lot of those cases, the aesthetics, if you will, may not be as important. So we might go to a silver frame panel and things, because occasionally, again, the gap is narrowed, but the black panels typically come at a slightly higher price point than the silver framed or poly panels. So you do pay a little bit more for it, but again, it's not a real game changer like it used to be.
And I've heard that the darker panels, then they get hotter, and these panels, the hotter they get, they lose a little bit of efficiency if they start to really heat up. Is that true?
That is true. It's interestingly kind of contrary thinking, if you will, but the hotter a solar panel gets, the less efficient it gets. They are more efficient the colder that they get. So again, it's a bit of a dueling mindset, right? You got these nice hot summer days, 95 degrees in July, and granted, you are getting a lot of energy. The days are a lot longer, but then on a 10-degree below January day with bright sunlight, they are actually more efficient.
Right. And people who are familiar with silicon and computers and their own phones or whatever know that like if you're trying to turn your computer up real fast, you need to keep it cool. It's the same idea. It's silicon panel, right?
Yeah. And then when you're talking about those temperature differentials between a mono panel and a poly panel up on a roof, the temperature up on that roof is going to exceed 120, 125 degrees typically on a hot summer day. So, you're probably talking about, 0.1% of difference between the two. So I wouldn't, especially at a smaller system, residential level, I wouldn't get too hung up on your potential energy inefficiency based on the color of that panel. It's going to be negligible at that level.
But another thing about keeping them cool, that's the reason the decking and the panels don't go right to the roof. They need the airflow underneath them to keep the cool, to keep the efficiency
we're going to touch on that. Yeah,
okay,
there's
great.
a racking system that will allow for airflow underneath there, and that is purely to help them cool off, no doubt. All right, next step in the line, if you will, coming off of the roof, once the DC power comes off those panels, it needs to be changed into that AC power, 240 volts, that can be integrated into your home and into your the local grid there, and that's done through a component called an inverter. There are numerous different types for residential purposes, especially with the onset of the code that's called rapid shutdown, which started to come around in 2014, really went into effect in 2017. That states that all the components on the roof must drop below 30 volts DC within 10 seconds of the system being shut down, give or take a few seconds on that. So in the old school string inverters, where the solar panels on the roof would just be wired in series and then brought down to a central inverter somewhere either outside or inside the home, you would be developing anywhere between 250 to 500 volts DC up on that roof. And then there's no way to shut a solar panel down other than taking it out of the sun. So as solar became more and more popular, out on the West Coast specifically is where it really started to go. The NFPA and National Fire Prevention Association and the NEC, National Electrical Code, started looking at things and started saying, hey, wait a minute, this is a major safety hazard. If we have first responders going up on that roof and they have to ventilate a roof and they chop into it and they encounter 500 volts DC at the end of their axe, that's not going to make anybody happy. So they started to develop codes, and then subsequently the codes pushed the development of the technology that will allow for these for those panels to be shut down locally, basically on a one-for-one basis. And that's done through either what they call an optimizer or a microinverter that lives underneath each and every panel. The panels plug in or wire into those devices, and then the energy is brought down into the home. And that allows for one-for-one shutdown. Again, going back to the previous conversation of that grid power. So whether it's by shutting off the circuit breaker where the system's interconnected, or a safety disconnect switch, or the grid power going down, the inverter through the line wiring will signal those optimizers or microinverters to shut down, therefore killing that high DC voltage and limiting it to the wiring just between the device and the panel itself. So it becomes as safe as possible up there on the roof for first responders and anybody else that might need to work on it.
So is that how it's done today? Is everything kind of moved away from a single large inverter to these microinverters on new panels you install today, or is it still a customer choice, or is it required by code to go to?
Well, it's customer choice to a point, and a lot of it will depend on what rendition of code your local jurisdiction is on. And because Illinois truly, all the towns, villages, counties are all autonomous when it comes to that. Nobody is on a standardized code rendition. So you can find municipalities these days still on the 2011 National Electrical Code, while some of them will be up to the 2017. And then we're going to have another one. They come out every 3 years. So we'll have another one coming up here at the end of 20 and then into 21. So you could still, if you lived in one of those jurisdictions, still, to say legally, install a string inverter and then have that high voltage coming off your roof. But anything in a code rendition that was after 2014, when rapid shutdown went into play, the installer should be using either a microinverter or an optimizer system for residential installations.
So I understand it. So it's clear for people that watch this video. The microinverter simply is taking it from DC to AC right there at the panel level. What's the micro conditioner, or what's that other item you called?
An optimizer.
What is how does that work, and how is it different than a microinverter?
Yeah, the optimizer works more on a voltage regulation on the DC side. So it has a set point where it will limit the amount of DC voltage that is created, and then it more regulates the amperage on the output side in order to develop the optimum output of the inverter. But the safety features are the same in that the inverter communicates to the optimizer through the wiring, and when the inverter senses grid power being shut down, it will signal the optimizers to disengage, and again creating that safety barrier electrically up on the roof.
Got it. So the optimizer keeps it DC, the inverter switches it to AC. That's the main difference.
Exactly.
Okay. And just so people are aware, if you have a single inverter, sometimes, as I understand it, historically those have been a little bit more efficient because you have less loss when you're dealing with higher voltage. But if you have partial shading issues, that's when these micro inverters and optimizers are more beneficial, because you're not hurting the entire system by taking off one big chunk that may be shaded. Is that right?
Yeah, and you know what? I have an image coming up of some monitoring screens that it's a good point to kind of talk about what you're describing there.
And the last question on inverters, sorry to hit you with so many of them,
no
but
worries.
I know everybody is, a lot of people are excited that are like me and really interested in renewable energy and trying to find sustainable solutions. Are really excited about electric cars, and a lot of these cars now in the electric car world, I've got a plug-in Pacifica hybrid, and Tesla's really big, and there's a couple other ones that are really getting popular, but they allow for DC fast charging. And it makes sense to, if you're going to have a car like that and you're going to have a bunch of solar panels, not to take your solar panels to AC and then try to ramp them back up to DC to charge your battery, not take all those losses. Have you heard of, or are people asking for DC to DC inverters specifically to charge their car? Are they keeping that on their same thing and just dedicating a portion of their array to it? Or how are people handling this? Or have you, probably not in Sandwich, do you get too many people asking that question maybe, but I think it will come up more and more.
No, and it is. And we have had all of the car chargers that we've installed to date are just standalone. You know, the Solar Edge inverters do have an integrated car charging port with it, but even within that, that is still being converted to AC before then it is being put into your automobile. The big problem with going direct DC to DC is voltage regulation. You know, coming off the roof, that voltage is going to swing wildly depending on how much sunlight there is. So the electronics to make that happen, while doable, really become expensive. So not to say that somewhere down the road, the technology won't be there that you can go more direct DC to DC in that fast charging scenario. But, you know, at let's say, you know, the pedestrian or residential level, it is still going to convert that solar energy into 240 volt AC to then be pushed into your car charger.
And not every electric car can even charge with DC direct, just to be clear. I think it's mostly common with the Teslas. I'm not even sure if my Pacifica can do it. I haven't actually looked into that part yet. But.
Right, and then that's, you know, with from what I understand, I'm not 100% sure, but Tesla has their charging network, which I believe is all fast charging DC stations.
Yep.
That they're taking great power and then running it what would be considered, not considered, but through a rectifier to then generate the DC power to push into those cars much more rapidly.
And people have talked about these electric cars actually operating as batteries for your home and allowing bidirectional ports and stuff. None of that's been enabled yet, but there's some talk that the latest Teslas can do that. But those are all things that we're getting way off topic here. I'll let you keep going with your presentation.
All right, then I was going to expound, but I won't. Here we go. Okay, we talked a little bit about the racking system. So we did the panels with the inverters. Now we're looking at racking. And if you look at this image here, right on this rail, you can see these, I believe, are optimizers bolted to the rails waiting for the panels to go on top of them. So it kind of gives you a blend of what's going on. Now we're talking about a metal roof here, but you can see the attachment points and then the rails, which keeps the panels roughly 3.5 inches above the surface of the roof for that air convection. Keep it moving down there and let them cool off a little bit. All of these rail systems are constructed of anodized aluminum and stainless steel hardware. So you should never see any rusting or anything like that up on your roof for 20, 25 years and beyond. They're all designed to last basically forever up there. And then these attachment points, when done properly, are bolted into the underlying structure. So they're not just to the sheeting, they're actually into the trusses or rafter system of the home, or building, and this, you know, in some cases it might be a pole building or something, to become actually part of the structure. That's all part of the engineering that then ties into these systems being able to withstand minimum of 110 mile an hour wind. Something, you know, like that derecho we had come through, of all the systems that we've got out there, we did not get one call of there being any wind damage, you know, when that system came blowing through. So when done properly, short of a catastrophic event, you know, tornado, everything should stay in place. And the engineering, again, with how many attachment points and the rail spacing and all that, takes into account snow load, wind load, and all those things so that that system can stay on that roof for 25 years and you really don't have to worry about it.
Great.
Now we look at a couple of different applications on a roof. You don't get a lot of homes of this nature with enough space to where you can do a flat roof mount on a home, but some do. And then the one on the bottom right, that's a commercial application. Those systems are what are called non-penetrating racking systems, or ballasted systems. So those systems are held down by concrete block in trays that, again, are all designed, certain amount of blocks in certain positions based on wind uplift and all that good stuff to make sure that they stay in place over the long haul. And now, again, we got the picture of the metal roof with the panels on it on this side, and on the bottom right, Anthony, a little more interest to you, but that's what a ground mount system would look like. In this particular system, we've got the concrete piers in the front and the back, and then 1.5 inch galvanized, rigid galvanized racking framework that sits behind to provide the structural integrity for that system. Again, all of this is all designed through an engineering firm that tells us how deep those piers need to be, what the spacing of them should be, where the supplemental supports and angled kickers and all that should be to withstand those 110-mile-an-hour winds and all through the.
So it's not a cookie
life.
cutter solution. These ground mount solutions have to be engineered, you're saying?
No, not at all. It's got to do with the topography, if there's hills, if it's on a slope, what pitch we're going to put it at. All of that gets pumped into a program and run through engineering to make sure that what we put in is going to withstand for the local conditions. So, I would talk to mention anybody that might be watching this is considering this, that your installer should provide you with all this information, right? It should be readily available and submitted for permitting, but then also for the consumer, if not at some point through the project, they should be given all this information that shows the system was installed, per engineering specifications and things like that for their peace of mind.
But there is not that engineering if it's going to be on a rack mount on your roof. You avoid that expense by going with the roof solution if you have it available.
Well, in most jurisdictions, when we submit for permit, our drawings are required to be stamped by a structural engineer saying that the roof will support the added load of the solar. So we work with a company and we provide them all of the installation specifications and then structural information about the home, and then they do their calculations and then put out a report and stamp drawings for us for the local jurisdiction and then for the customer.
Got it, but the engineering demand is still lower in that situation than it is on the ground mount. It's more expensive to engineer the ground mount system than it is to have the structural analysis done of the roof, or no?
You know what? When I'd have to dial it in a little bit closer, but when we contract for engineered drawings, it's basically done by job. They have flat pricing for residential systems, whether it's a ground mount or a roof mount. But then when you go into commercial, it's more based on how many panels and things go. So yeah, on these smaller ones, they kind of just standardize the pricing to keep it simple. And then that's all baked into our quotes. That's
it's not a massive difference then versus ground versus roof or the actual engineering portion.
No, there's really not.
Okay.
And now here an example of panels which most commonly here in our area is an asphalt shingle roof. The one thing to keep in mind is that all of the systems we use, or any good installer would use, are all designed for the specific roof or area that they're being installed in. The weatherproof flashings and how they all bolt together. In our area, we don't have a whole lot of clay tile, but down in the Southwest, there's clay tile. So their method of mounting is much different than ours would be. So again, these are all designed and engineered to be used for the application that they're being installed on.
And speaking of roofing and asphalt or architectural or whatever, how important is it to have a new roof versus an old roof versus a medium in the middle, not too old, not too new? Some people will say, if you get your entire roof covered in solar panels, it extends the life because it's not as much work on the shingles. Other people say, oh, well, you want to replace your roof before you get your solar panels because, you have to pull the solar panels off to replace your roof anyway. How does all that fit in?
When we go out and take a look at a site, first of all, through conversations with the homeowner, that if they feel or know that roof is within 5 years of needing to be replaced, we always suggest that they get that taken care of first. Because like you said, if we put that on today and a couple of years from now, just because of wear and tear, that roof has got to get replaced, then they're going to have the added labor expense to pull it all down, put it all back up. If it's handled properly, 99% of what goes up there, it would be all reusable. So again, it's just a labor expense that would be involved. Now, definitely, and Ray, you can attest to this and maybe talk about it, of the difference that we've seen on a roof that had solar panels and what over time, what the roofing underneath that looked like as opposed to the surrounding roof.
Yeah, I would tell you that it's a remarkable difference, and the panels do absolutely extend the life of that roof. But and we got pictures of it. People just couldn't believe the difference for what we found when we took off the panels and for her to replace the woman that we were working with to replace them. But again, at some point, it's not a miracle worker. The roof has to still be good, you know.
And you're not covering 100% of the roof with the panels too, so the
Correct.
exposed parts are still going to wear. Now, that's another question I had for you. I mean, everyone, on the internet's always super excited about these, SpaceX, Tesla, solar roof things that never actually happen, complete vaporware. I mean, some people have them, but you can't really get them. But there are a lot of other, traditional shingle manufacturers like CertainTeed, Gaff, Owens Corning that supposedly make these solar shingles that aren't exactly like the Tesla ones, but they're basically, shingles with the solar panels integrated into them, but they're still shingles than solar panel, but at least they're built into the roofing surface, so they run a lot hotter. Um, have you guys had any experience with those? If you are replacing a roof, does it make sense to examine going to something like, obviously the solar roof that Tesla has isn't really ready for prime time, but looking at the CertainTeed or the Gaff options, or do you guys know anyone who has, or have you investigated that yourself?
Yeah, you know what? I'm, of course, being in the industry, you always have your ear to what's going on out there. And we did have an opportunity to work on a project where it was a combination of, we provided traditional solar panels on one portion of the home, and then another portion was done in, and I forget the manufacturer at the time. It was not a Tesla product, but another combination roofing product that also served as a solar generator, solar modules. And the technology and all, does it work? Absolutely. The downside, if you will, if you're going to compare them to standard solar panels, is that where the solar panels are going to use the monocrystalline or polycrystalline cells within their construction, and that is where you get the greatest efficiency as far as the technology goes. When you move into the solar shingles and things, they use what's called thin film technology within those panels or within the roofing product for what they do. So the downside to that is it is nowhere near as efficient as the traditional monocrystalline or polycrystalline cells. So then the next step to that is you need a lot more of it to do the same amount of work as a traditional solar panel. So you're covering much more of your roof. And on top of all of that, then it is more expensive per watt overall. Again, they don't have the luxury, if you will, of economics of scale where they've got global production of these solar roofing shingles that are driving down the cost. So, there is beta testing and things that go on. In our area in the Midwest, you are very hard pressed to get any of those products. We talk to roofing contractors, and they catch wind of it. They talk about it a little bit, but it just never takes traction. So, it's going to be a very specialized client who's going to be really just focused on maybe the aesthetics of that system. And then they also have the pockets to go ahead and put it in. So I wouldn't be afraid of it from a functionality standpoint, but it's just when you look at the comparisons and then budget, what's the most viable solution for you?
Right. No, it's certainly going to be more cost, much more cost, and a lot less efficient for the dollar, because they're going to be hotter panels regardless. I think I've seen some like older generations ones where they had like a monocrystalline just kind of built into like these squares that would go on with shingles around them, but they were still much hotter because they didn't get that airflow underneath, and they weren't as efficient, and of course much more expensive. I just wanted to know if you had any experience with that. That's, I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah, I think the other thing you run into too, Anthony, is that there have been a number of companies that have gone down the path of starting research and development on that product, and had great ideas and great plans, but flat out ran out of money. And you buy some of these technologies and the manufacturer's gone. Now what do you do?
Right. No, yeah, that's why if I were doing it, I would look at one of these that are definitely been around for a while, but even still they are on like version 2 and 3 of theirs as well. So yeah, no, I totally get it. The other thing I was going to ask you guys, it kind of sits through my mind while we're on this topic of these solar panels and the roofs and the ground mounts. I've read that the latitude line of the Earth is kind of roughly the angle that you want to put your solar panel at. Is that true? And then what is that here in Kendall County?
Yeah, you're right. You do want to pretty much match a latitude. And for us, if we're going on the ground mount, right now, we're going to set it right at about 35 degrees. And if you were to, earlier we talked about that PV Watts program about energy production. PV Watts, you can set not only the tilt, the 35 degrees we're talking about, but also the azimuth, which is the orientation to due south. So 180 degrees would be due south. So
And
if
I've
you were to
heard
go
that
in,
magnetic south is not the same thing as the equator too, right? You have to be careful
yeah,
about that.
right. There's magnetic declination. If you really want to get fussy about it, it'll vary maybe 2 to 3 degrees at the most. So how much does that make a difference? Really not much, especially if you're on a property that's maybe a little smaller and you want the nice clean look of a square array against either a property line or a fence or another building, as opposed to being cocked by a few degrees and everybody will look at it and say, what the heck, that thing's out of whack.
Right. You
The
might
added
sacrifice your
production.
0.02% efficiency for that better look, right?
Right. So if you were to go in, to PV Watts and plug in 180 degrees due south and 35 degrees tilt, jot down that number or print it out and then change it to 30 degrees or 40 degrees or shift around, you'll start to see how it does change. It's incremental like you would expect. But yeah, right now, if we're going to drop one on the ground in our area, 35 degrees and 180 degree azimuth is going to give you your best year-round production on a fixed tilt array.
Right. And if you wanted to get, these fancy ones that usually aren't available for residential, but where it tilts, it would be something like one part of the year closer to 30, the other part closer to 40. And that's why 35 is a good happy medium to get you the.
You're right. You would do seasonal tilt. So in the summertime, you would drop it down 10 or so degrees because the sun is higher in the sky. And then in the wintertime, you would tip it up. And I think in theory, that's a great idea. But after a few years, a lot of times homeowners, if it's not a really nice day, who's going to get out there and help dad raise the array again? I'm leaving, dad, forget it. So again, for the added cost of those type of systems, now you've got a little bit of moving parts that may be more prone to breaking, things like that. I would say residentially, unless you're doing it for a science experiment, just put in a fixed array and enjoy the results.
Yeah, no, it's one of the greatest parts about solar, right? No moving parts. So you don't want to have to add any moving parts.
Right.
Unless you absolutely need to. One last kind of dream that I have is kind of off topic again, but I thinking about like this and trying to look at the big picture of the best way to design a house. To me, like a mid-century modern mono-pitch roof where the entire thing was at 35 degrees facing south, and
Sure.
you could just cover that whole thing with inexpensive panels and have it look integrated into the whole. You don't need fancy roof shingles then because it would look right. To me, that
Yeah.
would be like the ultimate. I think if I ever have another house, that's what I'm going to do. So
Yeah. And if you even go, different versions of that, if you were to look at passive solar designs, you would find things where houses were designed like that with the sloping roofs with a lot of windows on the south to absorb heat in the wintertime and things like that. But, absolutely, if you were going to build from the ground up, that would be the way to do it. Moving on.
let's do it.
Okay, so this is what we were talking about a little bit earlier when you're talking about shading and things, okay? So these up top and bottom are just two different inverter manufacturers' snapshot of their monitoring system. So you can see each little individual panel is shown and with its own individual production numbers. The upper one is an Enphase system and the lower one is the Solar Edge system. So there are a couple of great things about this. One is that individual energy production. So because the panels have those optimizers or microinverters underneath them, they truly operate individually. In the old world view of doing things with string inverters, if all those panels were run in series and brought down to the inverter, the nature of DC electricity, whether it's a battery or a solar panel, is that the entire string can only perform at the level of the least performing component. So on this system here, if in the morning, because there was a tree or something, if this corner of the array was shaded until, let's say, 11 o'clock in the morning, the entire array's production would be dropped to the level of those shaded panels until the sun cleared that tree and lit everything up equally. With these optimizers and microinverters, because every panel performs individually, in the morning, in this particular case, only that corner would have decreased production while the rest of the array was allowed to maximize production, and then these panels would catch up later on in the day. And the effects of that over time are really kind of amazing, because we do have numerous systems out there that have a little bit of shading here and there. And then as that production history moves on, it really starts to develop, and you see the differences over time. So to think that with an old school string inverter, your entire system would be reduced by that amount, it really kind of brings it to the forefront.
So Enphase and SolarEdge, these are two different inverter manufacturers that you use.
Yeah, these are our, these are a 1-2 punch for us, depending on the application. A little bit of a differentiator from our mindset anyway, and what we kind of think is that if there is a possibility for system expansion, that would be whether, there were budget constraints now, or the home experiences increased energy consumption over time. They add an EV, or they put a hot tub in that they didn't have when they put the system on, but they have room to add more panels. We feel that the Enphase systems are a little bit easier to expand upon. So if we know that that's a possibility, we may lean to Enphase, and otherwise then it would be SolarEdge. The other, as far as a performance standpoint goes, if you look up their information, of course, this one's going to say they're better than that one, and that one's going to say they're better than this one, and this is why. But at the end of the day, we really don't notice anything that stands out that says, wow, yeah, this system is so much better than the other. It just doesn't flesh out that way. It's more based on the weather than anything else.
Yeah, Anthony, I would tell you that those decisions on whether to go Enphase or SolarEdge are made really in the design process by me after I've had a look at people, how much they consume, what their roof surface looks like, where the panels are going to go, and that kind of thing. And in most cases, it's a pretty straightforward decision. And all else being equal, we tend to go with the SolarEdge just because it helps increase the Illinois incentive income by a slight amount of money over the Enphase, just by virtue of the way those things are calculated. So it's just all a part of the design process, really, for us.
And some technical questions. I help run an internet service provider company out of Newark, Illinois as well. And I'm always looking for devices that have Ethernet ports that aren't strictly Wi-Fi. Do both of these inverters have an actual Ethernet port on them?
Yeah, I prefer to hardwire them in,
of course,
whenever possible.
Of course, I'm the same way.
If it's remote or whatever the case might be, then yeah, we can do wireless. But whenever possible, yeah, we're putting a Cat 5, Cat 6 directly to a router.
And these devices, they have a web interface or just a smartphone app or both, or how do you usually manage them?
Yeah, both. It's kind of a neat thing that people find out over time, that this is another evolution in the industry too. Back when I started, these monitoring programs would come at an additional cost, so you would be paying a monthly fee in order to access your information. Well, nobody wants that, right? Nobody wants another monthly bill. So they changed a number of years ago to where they just incorporate lifetime of monitoring access, and you're just paying for it when you buy that inverter. So once the system is online, we do all the back end work and get it all set up, load in these maps and put it all together. And then the company itself, either Enphase or SolarEdge, will send the customer an email granting them access. And then they create their own login, and they can get in and see all this information and download reports and get as data crazy as they care to.
And it goes to the cloud, or do you have local access to the web server on the inverter?
No, we call it the mothership. After it leaves the inverter, it goes to Enphase or SolarEdge respectively, and then you are just given access to the portal.
Got it. Yeah, so you're not actually logging into your local web interface on the device.
No.
That's the way everything is going these days, right? Because nobody wants to create holes in their router, firewall, port forward, etc. So I got it.
No, right. You're getting it fed down directly from the manufacturer. And then the other great thing about this too is maintenance and troubleshooting. If anything were to go wrong, if up here on the Enphase, this panel right here, if something happens to it, it's going to go black. So we'll get an alert and we'll know there's a problem. We can open this up, say, oh, there it is right there, rather than having to go troubleshoot. How many are up there? 30 some odd panels. We know exactly where it is. The support systems of both companies are very good in that they'll remotely diagnose, dial into your system, see what's going on, and you can say, oh yeah, we saw that microinverter. We can see it was starting to act funny about a month ago, and now finally it just fritzed out. We're going to put one in a box, send it out to you, and it's a warranty replacement. So it's, it's super easy from diagnostics. Occasionally, they'll want us to go out and actually be on site and have a tech on site to kind of run it through its paces a little bit. But more often than not, it's diagnosed right here from the office. We get a new one and we come out and replace it.
So that's a great question. What about how does your company handle the ownership and the support? Is it the customer who's going to be handling that? Is there the warranty on the inverters versus the panels? You handle that, they just deal with you, and then you take it up with the manufacturer. How does all that work?
Yeah, at the end of the day, when we have our closeout meetings with our customer, they get warranty information on all the major components, of course, but we tell them that if you suspect something is wrong, number one, your monitoring program is going to tell you, right? It's all about performance and energy production. If you see a dramatic fall off in your energy production, well, there's a problem. We are your number one call. You don't want to be calling Solar Edge or the module manufacturer. You start with us, and if there's a problem, we have the connection all the way through to the distributor with the serial numbers all the way back to the manufacturer to then get that warranty process through the queue as quickly as possible. So yeah, everything begins with us.
So it's just like a service call, unless you guys offer some kind of service agreement. It's a service call or whatever.
Yeah, and really, if it's the basic diagnosis, because we too remain connected to this monitoring. So we have a dashboard with every system that we've installed that we can click on it and see what it's doing. So if Anthony's got his system online and either he gets an alert or suspects something wrong, you just give us a jingle, we pull it up and we say, oh yeah, okay, we see, or we got that same alert, we're looking into it and we'll get back to you. We go to customer support, and again, the resolution is decided upon, then we move forward. So, for that kind of service, if it's a phone call and an email, we're not charging anything for it. If it's, and actually we're in the middle of one now, where it's critter damage. We had an installation where
those
a
are
bunch
terrible.
of squirrels got up underneath the array and decided to have lunch on the wiring. And they finally did enough damage that it faulted it out and the system went down. That
we lost a few $1,000s worth of equipment 2 days ago on the exact same problem on the wireless internet service provider company.
Right. So yeah, no difference. So we're going to go out there and fix that, and then we're going to install a critter guard around it to keep them out. So things like that obviously are going to be a service charge, but just basic diagnosis and confirming that your system is working properly, we're going to take care of that for you because we want you to stay happy.
Got it.
I think that's one of the things that also surprises people that put in solar energy, though, Anthony, is that these systems are rock solid. And generally, if there's going to be a problem, a blip with it, we discover that very early after the installation. Once it goes in, they're really low maintenance.
It's mostly just Mother Nature or some animals that can probably cause most of the problems, similar to the internet service provider part.
Actually, Mother Nature plays a good role in that. Rain and snow helps keep the panels clean as well.
There you go.
Yeah, and that's a good point to bring on. Inevitably, we'll get people talking about what happens, when we get a bunch of snow out there. What should we do? So, well, grab a cup of coffee and put your feet up and watch a ball game or something, because it's not worth you risking your neck or possibly damaging something to think you're going to go up there on a snowy, icy roof, shovel snow off the panels to gain $2 worth of electricity over, a day or two before the sun comes out and it melts and it slides off. Leave it alone. If it's a case where it's ground mounted and you feel safe, and you had a very soft broom and you wanted to maybe sweep them off, I'll maybe side with you on that, but it's not worth the risk to your neck or possibly damaging something to think that you're going to go up there and chisel 2 inches of ice off these panels. Again, for what? The energy gain is going to be minimal.
Yeah, we've had to climb towers in the winter with a torch and use a torch on our antennas because people are complaining because they don't have internet service when there's a sheet of ice that just gets all over the antenna. So yeah, I definitely agree. We won't do it for residents, single customers, but we will do it on the tower if we've got 10 or 20 customers off of that.
Well, better you than me, Anthony.
Not me anymore either, trust me. Lots of cuss words are involved in those days. Keep going.
Right. Okay. So here in Illinois, you know, this is an interesting thing too, that maybe people get hung up on a little bit, and it causes some confusion in that literally state by state, and sometimes even within states, there's different incentives. So if you're using the wonders of the internet to research solar, make sure you are getting information that is Illinois specific, because you could be talking to any other state and it's going to be a different rate structures, different incentives going on. So make sure you're dialed into where you're at. So for right now, the balance of 2020, we still have the 26% federal tax credit available, and that's for systems on a residential level that need to be installed and online by the end of 2020. So coming here into mid-September, with the time it takes to get permitted and things like that, you know, we're kind of getting to that point now where you got to be under contract and ready to go, or you might run the danger of running into 2021. Now, hopefully, right, that 26% credit used to be at 30%. There was a big push to try and hold it at 30, but Congress did, and they let it move down to 26. And now, again, hopefully the solar energy lobbyists and whatnot will be talking, and I'm sure they are talking to Congress and everybody else about job creation coming out of the pandemic and things like that, because this definitely plays into that either we are allowed to maybe hold it at 26%, or best case scenario, they push it back up to 30 in order to help the country recover.
But the current law is 21 for next year, is that right?
22.
22, okay.
Yeah, 22
So
starting
you lose
in
about
2021.
4% of
Right.
that. But the other good news that I've heard is that the tariff that was placed on solar panels in 2016 is something in the neighborhood of, I think 15%. It was originally at 35 or something like that. But it's set to expire in January. So it may, even if you're stuck going with an installation in 2021, maybe your panels will be 15% cheaper. I don't know. If you guys said you didn't really notice a big difference. Well, I think the initial tariff in 2016 was 30 or 35%, and then it dropped to 15%, but it's still been at 15% for any solar panel not manufactured in the United States, which is basically all of them except for some of those thin film ones, which you don't really use in residential. But
Yeah,
do you guys have any insight on that?
I can just tell you what, really our experience was, again, barely a blip on the radar when that hit. Where all the excitement hit was with the big guys that buy shipping containers full of modules. So they rushed to say what, safe harbored a bunch of modules before the tariff hit things, because from them a 2 cent or 3 cent per watt shift on 20,000 modules is a big deal. But for us on the residential level, we really didn't see it, quite frankly.
Yeah, it'll probably be a little while before you get that relief too, because obviously those containers have to come over here. I think it's upon export or whatever. So there's still lots of warehouse of tariffed panels in the United States, I'm sure.
Yeah, and Anthony, there are a variety of places where panels are available from these days. There are so many different locations where you can source them from, some that are made here in North America and Canada and in the US. You'd be surprised how many of the offshore manufacturers also have brought manufacturing here to the United States as well.
Yeah, I think a lot of that tariff was Chinese, Chinese based, if you will. And really, I can't think of one panel that we deal with that is Chinese based. We do have some. I
thought it was all foreign, like Korea and everything too. But you guys would know better than me.
Yeah, you know what? I'm not going to speak to that because I don't want to misspeak.
Right. Okay.
But again, I echo what Ray said, that we're sourcing from several different lines from different parts of the world, and interestingly, a lot of times too, the All Blacks seem to be the manufacturing in the U.S. of the All Blacks is ramping up, so they're more readily available locally.
What's the brand on that one? I've heard that. Is it Solera or no? Not Solera. That's an old company.
Well, there's Solaria, which is a premium panel that has an all black. Silfab has an all black. Mission Solar is another U.S. based company. They have an all black. And then Axatech is a German engineer. They have an all black. Most major players are adding an all black model to their line for the residential market. They're really not used commercially because, again, they're up on flat roofs or whatever, or out in a field somewhere, so it's not such a big deal. but it's more the residential market that's driving the all black.
Yeah, we did not see a tremendous increase in price with all of the rhetoric and heated discussions between Washington and China over tariffs and everything else. And you know, I think in some cases where those tariffs got kicked in, you saw the supplier reduce their price to help offset that tariff. And, you know, depending on where they're coming from, it's easy for those countries to do that kind of thing.
We'll see if they raise their price back up in 2020 when the tariffs expire.
Yeah, right. And really right now from our vendors or anything like that, nobody is, I mean, we're still in Q3, but nobody is giving us any kind of a heads up of, you know, if you're looking out into 2021, you know, beware, because we see this coming down the pipe. And to date, nobody is waving those flags yet.
Well, they probably don't have an incentive, do they? Because they need to move all this tariffed product out. But
right.
Yeah, I will tell you that, you know, I recommend a couple of different manufacturers. One of them that's located here in North America, a Canadian company with manufacturing in the US and Canada. And the other one is is from Norway, and they're among the most competitive price panels on the marketplace and come with phenomenal warranties. So from our point of view, we just don't see that impacting us.
Cool.
Okay, now I don't know how much time you got, Anthony, but the Solar Renewable Energy Credit Program is a mouthful, and I could spend probably an hour talking about that alone, but I'll try and keep it simple. So SREC, right? That's the common term, and that stands for Solar Renewable Energy Credit. Basically, that was created in order to offer incentives for people in Illinois to install solar. It's tied into, we touched earlier about the Renewable Portfolio Standard, or RPS, about driving up the amount of renewable energy on the Illinois grid. So it's a ratepayer-based program. So anybody in Ameren or ComEd or Mid-American territory all pays into this bucket of money and has been for a lot of years. Then back in 2016 with the Future Energy Jobs Act, that money was budgeted to do a lot of things, but a big chunk of it was set aside to offer incentives to install solar from from residential size systems to commercial size to community solar to then much larger private systems. So they carved the pie up into a couple of different chunks, and it's been great. It really drove the boom of solar in Illinois to the point where those other three sectors were oversubscribed almost overnight. The money set aside for community solar, the last I knew, was over 300% subscribed to. So they're waitlisted now for maybe indefinitely, depending on what happens. But on the residential side of things, we still have a good amount of that budget that's available. So the incentive is derived from system production. So the larger the system, the more the incentive is going to be. And that kind of runs proportionately based on the fact that you're putting in a bigger system, it's going to cost you more money to put it in. So it's basically offsetting the same percentage of your installation cost, whether you're putting in a 10-panel system or a 30-panel system, because it's all based on system production. So once that's all calculated out, you get into a contract with a third-party aggregator. Basically, they act like a stockbroker, because individuals are not allowed to play in the sandbox like this. You got to have an intermediary there on your behalf. So when it's all said and done, the Illinois Power Agency is who holds that money. Your system is put into the queue, applications, all the information is provided to prove that, yes, indeed, the system was installed and is online. And then after all that happens, the IPA releases your money, and then you are sent a check for the appropriate amount. That whole process, we tell people you got to be patient with that. It could take up to a year after your system is installed, because when these SRECs and applications are processed in batches, so they'll wait like a quarter at a time to gather up however many literally hundreds of applications, and put them all in one bucket, and then take them to the market, get them allocated, and then they march through the system for approval, and then your check is written. But between the federal tax credit and the solar renewable energy credit, you can expect anywhere, it's around 55 to 60% of your installation costs on a cash purchase basis, you'll recoup it between those two incentives.
Got it. And the federal, is that, so you say you're waiting for up to a year for the state SRECs. With the federal, is that more immediate, or how long does that usually take?
Well, it's a federal tax credit. Now, this is where I got to tell
that's
everybody.
When you do your taxes, right?
Right. And they might be listening that I am not an accountant, and I'm not going to pretend to be. So you need to consult your own tax professional. So that is, then you can take advantage of that on the following year. So if you install in 2020, when you file your 2020 taxes is when you can claim that credit. So it just goes with the tax season on that. And that tax credit is based on the full installed cost of the system.
And there's some formula to reduce your taxable income based off of that, I'm sure. But
well, yeah,
said,
right. Depending on what kind of wage how your wages are and your tax deduction, so that you can manage that to most effectively take it, to get it either all in one year. If you can't claim it all in one year, you can roll it forward. So it's not like you lose it, depending on your tax liability.
Got it.
Again, consult a tax professional to make sure that you're getting that right.
So your out-of-pocket cost is your out-of-pocket cost. You guys don't hide any of these rebates things. It's incumbent on the owner to actually recoup those rebates in their previous tax, or in their subsequent tax years, and in their 1 year later, plus from the Illinois federal SREC program.
Right.
Sorry,
Yeah,
Illinois State SREC program.
We will march our customers all the way up to the trough, if you will. All paperwork is provided. We make the connections with the SREC aggregator. We make sure those contracts are written and signed and in place as all part of our service, at the end of the day. So when that customer when we're shaking hands at the kitchen table for the last time, all of these wheels are all in motion. And they should be lined up to get everything taken care of. Of course, when it comes to filling out their tax return, they need to remember that they did this, and then file the appropriate form with their taxes.
A few $1,000s helps people remember,
just to clarify here on the residential side of this, you said there's a lot of money available. I didn't hear that you clarify that it's a size limit on that where that money is available.
No, you're right. I did not. And as part of the other buckets, if you will.
We can go through a couple of these, and we'll see that, right? If we go through my my neighbors.
Yeah, you're right. And they are. But the one key to remember is right now, within the SREC program in the state of Illinois, the Illinois Shines program, there is no more funding available for systems that are larger than 10 kW AC rated. So that's the peak output rating of the inverter. There is money available in that sector of the program, but anything above that, if you go ahead and install a system, at best you'll be put on a wait list for that SREC money, contingent upon there being funding in the future. So there will be no guarantee that you will ever see that money on systems larger than 10 kW AC installed.
That doesn't refresh next year. That's just where it is.
Right. It was a one-time budget that again was used up really quickly. So unless there is future funding that comes down through the Illinois legislature, anybody that's waitlisted now or installed, counting on that money may very well never see it.
I will tell you that 10 kW puts you at a pretty good size system in real terms, in terms of panels. Depending on the wattage of the panel, it's anywhere from 35 to 40 plus panels, which is covers a lot of residential needs, really. And part of the design process, again, from our point of view, is to make sure that we keep you under that 10 kilowatts AC, and that we look at mechanisms for maybe expanding the system at a later date and claiming more tax credits and more SREC income at a later date too.
On the residential side, we see typically between 6 to 8 kW AC is on average where we're at. So 10 kW for a average home, that's a big system. So yeah, it'll cover a lot of consumption.
Yeah, I mean, my house is on the bigger
side. You're above average, Anthony.
Yeah. But I mean, if you have multiple EVs too, I mean, you're going to want to crank that up. But like you said, Ray, you can expand it later, right?
Yep.
You can.
Yep. Okay, earlier we talked about net metering, and that's the process where the utility company acts as your storage bank for excess power. And one thing to remember there, and there is some confusion out there on that, but it is 1-for-1 retail net metering. So if you're paying 12 cents a kilowatt hour, you will get 12 cents per kilowatt hour worth of credit on your bill. And that's the way it stands right now. Things could change. There are some places in the country where there is no net metering or it's wholesale net metering. But for right now, within ComEd and Ameren territory, and I know that even Corn Belt is out by not too far from you, Anthony, and a few of the others, they're all offering 1-for-1 retail net metering. Yeah. The application for all that and making sure that that is engaged for you, again, all falls within what we take care of. So in our interface with the utility companies, we make sure that we provide them all the information that once your system is online, that happens and that shows up on your monthly statement.
I've been listening to some news coverage that on this specific topic that 100% retail net metering is definitely not sustainable and breaks the whole thing after a certain percentage of customers try to take advantage of that. So as you guys are more successful and we become more renewable, you can expect it to drop to something like wholesale or no net metering at all for some areas. Hopefully not. Hopefully we can keep it wholesale at least. But it's almost not fair to sell the company back stuff at retail. It's like going to Walmart and buying all their stuff and then going in the return lane and trying to make Walmart pay you back the 100% retail cost. Walmart would go broke if everybody tried to do that. And it's the same for the power companies. Is that right?
Yeah, in essence, yes. There are benchmarks within all of the investor-owned utilities. So again, the Amerens and the ComEds, Mid-American, that there's, to call them saturation levels, that once they hit certain percentage benchmarks of their overall demand being met by solar, that at some point net metering is going to either step down or be phased out. But in conjunction with that, again, don't take my word, but what is being talked about is that in place of retail net metering, there is going to be some sort of one-time utility rebate payment. And how that'll be calculated out or all, I have no idea, but there is saying that, yeah, when net metering twilight's out, that the ComEds of the world are slated then to offer you a one-time rebate check to compensate for, if you will, the loss of net metering. And again, that's down the road a piece yet.
There are states that don't have net metering at all?
Absolutely. Hawaii did away with it years ago. Their saturation level went through the roof. You'll see that a lot more, especially in areas of really high cost of electricity. So Hawaii, New York, other areas where, people in our area, they'll be grumbling about the cost of electricity. Well, look around. Our electricity is cheap. Other parts of the country, it's triple, maybe even 4 times. Especially, again, you go to Hawaii, everything's imported. So all their fuel, everything, their cost of generation is huge. So it's much more expensive. So yeah, they couldn't sustain net metering there. But what they did there, and what may start to happen even around here, is with the intelligence of inverters and also then battery-based systems, there is the capability to release your battery power during the day in order to curb your consumption from the grid. So you would self-consume your battery power at peak demand times, clip off the top end of your usage, and save money that way. And all that technology is out there now. It's just a matter of employing it. Is it cost effective in the area you live in? If you live in an area that has retail net metering, the cost of installing a system that can do that type of work for you is going to be much greater than the savings you would realize by being able to offset using your batteries.
It sounds like that's some kind of real-time pricing where the system knows what the real-time price is and only sucks down power to charge your batteries or whatever when the price is low. Is that the idea?
Right. There are systems out there that are intelligent enough that they will learn your consumption curve and they will be keyed into the local real-time pricing rate. And then it will, like we had these last couple of months, if you're on real-time pricing with ComEd, they send you an email that says, okay, tomorrow between the hours of 4 and 6, we're going to be at peak demand, and your per kilowatt hour price is going to go up considerably. So you would be able to factor all that in to tell your system, okay, starting tomorrow at whatever, 3:30, start letting out battery power to curb our grid consumption and take the edge off of that peak demand pricing. Call it peak shaving, if you will.
Can you help me this? In my mind, every time that naively, every time that it's going to be peak power demand is going to be when the sun is really shining and it's really hot. So wouldn't that be the time that these solar net metering things are going to help the grid the most?
Well, yeah, you're right, because then again, it does take the pressure off the overall demand of the grid. And then we're going to go back to your comment earlier about EVs having the capability to dump their battery power back on the grid. And again, the technology exists. It's just a matter of come the day when it makes sense that you would basically allow the utility company, if your car is plugged in and there's a peak demand problem out there, that they could tap into all of that stored energy and have it released back into the grid to curb that peak demand throughout a much greater area. So yeah. That is all out there already.
I'm more interested in just letting your car keep your house running at night when there's no sunshine, but to the grid too obviously makes sense too. And to be clear, no manufacturer of an EV has enabled that feature yet, but
right.
they certainly could. Like you said, the technology is there.
Yep. And then property tax protection within the state of Illinois. Basically, it states that your property tax cannot be increased due to the fact that solar energy has increased the value of your home. So when you are when you're assessed, solar can't be looked at any differently than if you had to replace an air conditioner or a furnace or any other vital component of the home that does not truly drive the value of the home. As opposed to if you put on an addition or a huge deck or something like that added other kinds of value. And that only makes sense too, because if you knew that your property taxes were going to go up based on the added value that solar has given your home, well, you'd really have to take a hard look at what that meant and would it even be worth it. So they put that protection in place. And again, at the end of the day, at the end of an installation, we provide our homeowners with the form that then is filed with your local assessor to put you on record that you installed solar, and then the assessor is aware of it, and you should never see an increase because of the solar on your home.
That's a quick aside. I mean, I think to me, it'd probably go in the neighborhood, like in the area of pools or above ground pools. Solar panel installation on your house doesn't necessarily increase its value. Probably doesn't decrease. It just depends on the market and the owners, right? There's no hard and fast rule as far as the real estate market's concerned, right?
Well, yeah, just like anything else, it's only worth what somebody's going to pay for it.
Right.
But when you look at the building statistics of homes selling faster and for more than their comparables in an area, there is starting to be some pretty compelling evidence that adding solar to your home is going to be financially beneficial if you do indeed have to sell it.
Got it.
And then just real quickly, if you are a business, you install solar, you then would also get the added benefit of depreciation, just like any other equipment that you would buy for your business. So that would be an added incentive. And then this, last line, may significantly reduce your utility bill. That's case by case. But what we do know is that the instant we turn that system on, you are buying less power from the utility company and you are saving money on your bill monthly. It's just a matter of what percentage based on your consumption and how your system is sized. But the savings happen right now, and you realize it right away. Okay, as kind of a bit of a legality, even anytime us, Independence Renewable Energy, as a registered agent within the Illinois Shines program, which is the part of the whole SREC program, we are from a regulatory standpoint, we are bound to offer this brochure. Basically, it is the consumer protection part of this, to know that, this ain't just Ray and Norm making up this BS. It's through the Illinois Power Association. It gives you resources to do some research, to know that this program is legitimate, and other protections that are out there should you decide to move forward, or if you even have any problems, it gives you an avenue then to get some support if something doesn't quite go right. So we always, every time we initiate a conversation with a customer, again, we provide this, and any other installer that you may call upon should also give this right up front as part of their presentation. And I know we've done a lot of Q&A as we've rambled through this, but we're at that point. That's the end of the formalness of it. Anyway.
I appreciate that, Norm. No, I've got a bad habit of interrupting people, but I think it adds to it for sure. At least in my own mind, it does. Maybe not the people who are watching.
You're the host, so you can interrupt anything you want.
All right, thanks. So I think maybe if we have a little bit of time now, we could talk about, I've got a neighbor in Newark that's looking at getting a solar installation, and I know you guys have bid one for him, and I've got that PDF. I think you guys have it too, and we can maybe go through that. So it's probably a pretty good example of maybe an ideal situation, like as far as the amount of power the guy needs and how most of his roof is south facing off the street. It just seems like a perfect one. Then my house, which is kind of maybe more of a nightmare scenario where I've got a high power demand and all my south facing roof is on the street and not really usable because it's all different angles, which is why I have this love affair in my mind of some kind of mono pitch roof to the south now. But we could go through those really quick, just kind of look at the numbers, look at the payback, look at the cost, and help people understand like what might be kind of a good case scenario, bad case scenario. And then on my personal one, I'm sure I'll have lots of questions as far as different things. But let's go through real quick the numbers on Chris's, if you don't mind. And also as an aside, go ahead, Ray.
Anthony, if you can just start on maybe the image of the design itself, we could touch a base on that briefly.
Sure. You want me to share it on my side?
Yeah, if you want.
Sure. All right. You don't have any more slides, right, Norm?
No, that's it. I'm going to get a cough drop and shut my mouth for a minute.
All right. Thanks. I really appreciate you going through that for us. That was really, I learned a lot, and I hope other people who are curious are able to learn something from it as well. So, yeah, here is the PDF that you created for Chris. He's one of my neighbors on the street. And just for the record, I know you guys said it's just crazy that there isn't a standardized electrical code or these things change in every municipality that you go into. I'm going to the Newark Village meeting tonight. Apparently they need a text amendment in their zoning ordinance to allow these solar panels on the roof, but I'm gonna just go there and make a citizen's comment that I'm really excited about them taking that on. And hopefully, someone told me the 21st of this month, they might be able to either get that on an agenda or vote on it, but I'll hopefully get some clarification on that tonight. Because as of right now in the Village of Newark, for whatever reason, the way the code is interpreted, roof mount isn't allowed, but ground mount is. And I think that's kind of opposite to a lot of communities, right? A lot of communities allow roof mount, but not ground mount. So hopefully in Newark, we're able to allow both. And then we can let people get what works best for them to try to save money, save the environment, and be forward-looking and sustainable and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, this is the guy's house. The street is on the shadow side here, and this is a south-facing roof.
Yeah, so from a design perspective, they really have an ideal roof for placing solar, especially in terms of the ability to maximize system production. One of the things that we do in putting together the design for these systems is you have to look at a couple of key factors. One is the pitch of the roof or the tilt of the roof. The other is the direction that it faces. Literally, we use a design tool that by placing that information on there and telling it the panel that we want to put in for their system, it literally will size the panels accordingly to match the tilt of the roof and the direction that it's facing. Then we try to look at it from an aesthetic point of view and give you something that is as pleasing to the eye as you can see, something nice and square, centered along the top where there's not as many panels, for instance. You look then at trying to avoid any obstructions that you run into there. There's a satellite dish I see there. You run into chimneys that are going to create some shading. You've got a couple of roof vents. So the design really just is a matter of working around those things and putting it into a fashion that will make it look as beautiful as possible to give you what you need to offset. In his case, you can see you've got some gaps along the top of the panels. You've got a gap on the right-hand side and on the left-hand side. Every single municipality has a requirement for what they refer to as emergency setbacks. And typically, lacking any real good guidance, we try to allow 3 feet on each side and 3 feet along the top of the ridge line for emergency setbacks. So for fire personnel, if God forbid they have to get up on the roof to ventilate in the case of a fire, they've got room to get up there and move around. So that's why you see the gaps on each side and along the top there.
And since the road goes on the north side of this house, east to west, anyone driving by would have no idea this guy had solar installed from the road.
Yep.
Cool. So this is all the new stuff. This is all the stuff we talked about already. Why choose you guys? Why go solar? These are kind of like the specs here. You want to walk us through these lines here?
Yeah. So this, I think, gives you a great example of what the system might look like and what the costs involved with it are, and also what those incentives look like in real dollars. Just on the left-hand side, your solar system details, total system size of 9.92 kilowatts DC. It's simply a matter of how many panels are there and what's the wattage of them. In this case, it's 31 panels, and they're rated at 320 watts each. You do the math and you come to 9,920 watts, or 9.92 kilowatts DC. Literally, by giving us a copy of your electric bill that shows us your consumption in a bar graph form or in just in a text format, we're able to calculate what you actually use over the course of the year. And that's really what we're using as the target to offset from a system design point of view. So in his case, they actually use 13,214 kilowatt hours per year of energy. And that's what we're shooting for.
This gentleman also has a Volt, I think, a plug-in electric hybrid car as well.
So in his case, by calculating 31 panels at 320 watts and using the tool that Norm showed earlier, the PV Watts tool, to project how much the system will produce, we literally come up with an annual kilowatt hour production of 13,472 kilowatt hours, just a little over 100% offset of his electric bill.
And this is a 9.92 DC, but as far as the SREC 10 kilowatt, that's the AC equivalent after the loss for the inverters, right?
It is
so this
9.92 DC rating for the array size. But the AC rating that we use for calculating purposes for SRECs is the size of the inverter, or the sum of all of the microinverters.
Right, so it would be something like 8 here, right, roughly?
Yeah, I think it was 7,600 actually in this case, but we'll see here in a minute.
I think, okay. Right? Well, you've got that coming, Ray?
I think so.
Let's
keep going
down below, I believe.
So, and just to get to this net system cost here, so you guys install it, he's going to get a bill for $29,300. He's going to be able to recover this 26% either over 1 or 2 years on his income tax. The idea is he'll have to talk to his accountant about that. And
Correct.
Within a year or two, he might be able to get a check back from this SREC program in Illinois for $11,100. And this utility savings, this is over a 10-year, 20-year, what is the window on this?
If you scroll down there, Anthony, you'll see it was 9 years in his case on the payback.
Got it. So in 9 years, this thing is only going to cost him $500, and then it's just making him free money or energy, however you want to look at it.
Yes.
Got it.
Yeah,
so that's the payback there.
I'm sorry there, guys. It's we're talking solar edge there. It's actually microinverters in his case. I don't recall exactly why we did that, or I did it, but we're using the microinverter. So literally it's the sum of the microinverters that come up, and I don't have that math handy, but we could do that if you wanted to.
Okay, that's all right. So after 9, then after 25 years, he's so walk us through these columns here.
So this is a spreadsheet that we put together that allows you to determine savings on an annual basis, and then look literally accumulating over time how much money you're going to save. On the left-hand side, just the number of years. The second column from the left, the kilowatt hour production, that's where we started with what we're projecting the system is actually going to produce in the first year is 13,472 kilowatt hours. We, in this case, calculated there's a degradation value that you assume is going to happen for the panels over a period of time. In this case, it's 0.5%. First 5 years, it's relatively stable. After that, you can expect the panels just to degrade slightly from just based on the electronics by about 0.5%. So we try to factor that in just to give people a more accurate view over what the system will be producing in 25 years and for the calculation purposes as well.
You got the price per kilowatt hour going up. Yep.
We literally start in the case of, this is an Ameren territory, and we start with a kilowatt hour rate that you're paying for electricity through Ameren of 7.188 cents per kilowatt hour. And we assumed in this case a 3.5% increase every single year in utility costs. This is one of those things that there's no exact science to it, Anthony. We now tend to look more toward 2.8% just based on some of the research we've done. But it's really designed to give you some kind of a feel for, we know that utility rates are going to go up. It's just a question of how much. In this case, if you assume 3.5% per year, you get down to 25 years from now, you're going to be paying over double for your kilowatt hour usage if you were to not put in solar and continue to pay the electric bill.
Got it. So you've got him at roughly $1,000 a year of what his supply costs on his bill are. And then just going up for inflation or expected increase of it.
Annual savings goes up the same way that the kilowatt hour rate goes up. As it goes up, you just expect that you're going to save more money. And the accumulated savings is literally just an addition on a yearly basis to the point where I always try to see where do we break even after net costs, and then that 25-year savings to give you a feel for if you are there for 25 years, you're literally going to save $35,000, almost $36,000 there.
So let me just break this down into round numbers just so it makes sense for me. So it's gonna roughly cost him $30,000 to get this thing installed. He's gonna roughly get $20,000 back through different subsidies. It's gonna cost him out of pocket by the time he gets those refunds roughly $10,000. Then by year 9, he has saved roughly $10,000 in cost. Then going on, by year 25, if all this math, I think it's a little foggier as you go out, but he would have saved $35,000 minus 25 or minus the 10 he paid for it. So it would actually be
correct
earning him roughly $25,000 over 25 years to have this system.
Correct.
If these assumptions hold, but even if they don't, even if you use the $1,000, it's still going to be earning you money after it looks like 9 years, whether it's 25 or 35 or 15. It's still pretty incredible. I tell people when I'm talking to them, if you've got the house for it, it makes complete sense. You're never going to do better than installing solar panels on your home. If you don't have the right house for it, or you're in an apartment or whatever, you can start looking at these other ideas like community solar is attractive, but you're never going to do as well. You're going to get 20-25% off the Ameren rate for the next 10 or 20 years. That's good. That's not bad, but you're not going to be getting $15,000 or $25,000 in your pocket after 25 years.
No, right? and I would tell you that the numbers I've seen are between 10 and 15% savings on community solar over what the Ameren rate is going to be. And I'll tell you, you also run into the situation where people don't want to invest that much money in a system in terms of cash, especially during these times of COVID. We also offer a phenomenal loan program for people that is zero down, zero interest for 18 months, so that they give you that time to collect that tax credit and that SREC income, re-amortize the loan and pay that down. And then after that, it's a 2.99% rate over the remainder of the term. And I'm seeing savings over the current amount of money people are paying consistently at anywhere from $35 per month to $50 in the first year per month.
So what I hear you saying is if you want to lose a little bit of that savings and you want to pay a little bit of interest and you've got a decent credit rating, then anyone can do this.
You know, the beautiful thing about the loan program is that there's no prepayment penalty. You can pay that off at any time. So a couple of years from now, things get better from an economy point of view. You can pay off that loan and no penalty.
So there's really nothing holding anyone back as long as you've got decent credit and you have a house. You're confident you'll be there for at least a few years. This thing can pay for itself pretty quickly, and then it's just gravy after that. And this is the graph you showed earlier in your presentation. It looks like, oh, this is instead of Miami in the background, this is the current utility power, so you can kind of see.
Yeah, that's actually a real life comparison of the two, and a great look at how net metering works. January, they're not going to produce as much energy as they need from the solar to completely offset their usage based on history. But then starting in February all the way through June, they're actually going to produce more energy. That energy is going to be fed back to the grid. It's going to be held in the form of credit for them for down the road where they don't produce enough energy from a system point of view. And literally the two offset, and in the end, he should only have to pay for his connectivity to the grid, his net metering, and any other miscellaneous costs that Ameren might have.
And this is his current usage with his EV or his plug-in EV on there, right? So he's not only saving electricity costs, but he's not buying gasoline, and he's commuting back and forth to work. I think his Volt gets about 30-ish miles per charge. So if he's got a 15-mile commute each way, he's also driving back and forth to work for free on Sunshine. And that's just great. You know, I'm looking forward to trying to do that on my Pacifica as well.
Yeah, I will tell you too that from a design point of view, that depending on who the supplier is, you typically can oversize the system ahead of what you're actually currently consuming in the event that you want to look at putting in a car charger for EV or a pool or something that you know is going to create more electricity usage. You can then actually plan for that.
We don't need to go over this ABB process.
Yeah, the only thing I would tell you about that specific graphic there is that this is a really formalized process from the Illinois Shines program perspective, and they've got it all laid out in terms of what you can expect in terms of timeframes to hit every one of the milestones in their process from when you sign to when you get paid. I tend to take a more conservative approach and tell people plan on a year just to be safe. Rather have you happy and get it in 8 or 9 months than unhappy
this process is the one you shepherd the customers through. So even though this looks complicated, you just sign the papers and send them in or something like that.
Yeah, and I will tell you that you know, we shepherd them through all the processes. We file all the paperwork necessary with the utility, whether it's Ameren or ComEd. We apply for the permits with the local municipalities. We pay for those costs. Depending on whether they want or not want, we can include the costs associated with applying for that Illinois incentive program as well into the contracted amount so that they can then claim the tax credit with it. So we make it as easy as possible for them to the point where literally they receive documents, they have to sign them or e-sign them, and everything else we take care of for them.
All right, great. So let's move on to my house. So that was the best case scenario. This guy's got a plug-in hybrid. He can drive on Sunshine. He can make $15,000 to $25,000 over the course of 25 years of savings in his pocket on top of not even counting the gasoline savings. It's all built into that. So here I am. Here's my house, and I bought it. I'm not the primary owner. I did not design this roof. Unfortunately, this is my south-facing roof. There's barely space for a mini panel all over this, and that would just be really, even I'm a pretty big nerd, but that'd be too ugly for me facing to the south. I know you guys have had some success with doing east and west parts of the roof, and I'm sure that, like we talked about earlier in this conversation, there's an efficiency loss to be had there, but it's not terrible, which can be made up by just adding a few panels. And we kind of talked about that too. Even those roofs aren't fantastic here, but we could probably stick some panels. But what makes most sense to me, we just had that windstorm, and these are two apple trees in my backyard. This one kind of got pretty wrecked up, so it probably could come down. But putting it in the back corner of my yard here does make some sense. We'll have to look at how that's going to break out cost-wise. But
yeah, I think it's a good thing for us to talk about as well. We make some assumptions when we design these systems based on satellite imaging and looking at it. We then have to confirm those assumptions on site. And Yours is a perfect case where we actually had Eric, our lead installer, go out and have a look. He discovered that you've got a storm sewer there in the back corner of your lot that we're going to have to avoid a little bit. Those panels will have to come up a little bit. We also, based on that, had to look at a few things, and we can easily add some panels on the east and west roof faces and eliminate some of the size of that ground mount system there for you, and actually give you a hybrid system that'll be a combination of the ground mount and roof mount using the east and west roof surfaces.
Yeah, we could look at all kinds of solutions and figure out what the best cost-effective one. I used to have a swimming pool here. I took that down a couple of years ago. So I've got some flexibility as far as this, and be kind of curious. Is the way this was intended? Obviously, this would need to move up. You can see kind of like the water pathway as it goes down into that sewer that's back there. But either way, even if it was, we can't get too close to the house because then the house is going to cast a shadow on it, right? That's the trick.
Right, and just from an aesthetics point of view, most people don't want it right out their backyard while they're out on the patio or on the deck having an enjoyable dinner or something.
Yeah, I can tell you I don't really use my backyard, but if I ever want to sell the house, I think you're probably right. So, and that's something I need to think about before making this investment is how long I'll stay here. Hopefully I'll stay here for a while. I'll be on the Kendall County board, and I'll want to maintain that elected position that I worked hard for. So we'll just see. Let's go on and take a look at some of these numbers. So again, on this one, I think we were right up against that 10 kilowatt to get the Illinois SREC limit. So you've got my solar panels here. Looks like this is one of the nice black ones with the mono.
Yeah, this is REC. They actually have a combination black with white that you see there. And then for a slight upcharge, they also provide an all black panel. Typically, we find that in ground mount units, it's not as important to people whether they're all black or not. I will tell you too that as time goes on and we get closer to making decisions on going forward with customers, we also take a look at what's available on the market, and we try to give you the best available panel that we can be confident we're going to get. In the case when I've done this, and even today, we're comfortable and confident you can get those panels easily. And they come with a 25-year warranty for quality, a 25-year warranty for production, meaning they'll continue to produce as expected for 25 years with a slight degradation. And they also come with a limited labor warranty for 25 years. So
they're 315 watt panels. And
in your case, they're 315 watt. Yep.
Yeah.
And when we get down to it, they might have 320s that are easily available as opposed to 315s, and we'll talk through that with you.
Okay, great. So here's my system cost. Not too far off really from what we saw from my neighbor, about 30, and then here's that roughly 20, a little less than 20, and then again 9 years is what I'm looking at for my payback. We got two charts here. This is based off of a best case and a worst case. So want to walk me through these a little bit?
Yeah, this is one of the changes that we made in our calculations. And I'll just say that in terms of the payback too, it's kind of a double-edged sword in Ameren in that the utility rate you're getting charged is less than ComEd, for instance. So you're not accumulating as much savings as quickly as if you were paying a higher rate as you go along. So I guess that's the good news, but it's also why we see a 9-year payback in this case. One of the things that we try to do though now with designs for people is give them a view of best case and worst case. When we did it for Chris, we really just looked at here's what you can look at over 25 years. Since then, we did some research. We found some studies, one in particular that really said that the increase per year in the United States for utility rates is more like 2.8%. So I don't want to tell you it's 3.5% per year when the studies indicate 2.8. So on the right-hand side there, we've actually lowered the increase in utility costs per year down to 2.8%. And you see if that holds true in the case of Ameren, you could expect to save on the right-hand side $33,729. I also try to give people the worst case scenario. Say for some crazy reason, the rates never go up over the course of 25 years how much would you actually save by going solar? That's what you're seeing on the left there. The rates have not changed over the course of that 25-year projection, and the
Right. So now
numbers are
my
still
payoff is in year
almost
10.
24,000.
Yeah, my payoff is in year 10, and then I'm still making $13,000 by the end of the 25 years that I'm not paying in energy costs. And I'm charging my Pacifica on this as well. So I'm driving back and forth to Yorkville and picking up my daughter from daycare and whatnot, all on sunshine in this scenario. And here's my usage. You can see my house uses a lot of AC in the summertime. So even with this big solar array, I can't quite offset that.
But again, no need, because you're gonna do better in those spring months, and you're gonna have it in the bank by the time you get to summer.
Right. I'll be having that net metering and putting it in my Ameren bank, and I'll just use it up there in July, August, and September. And again, if I pick the right inverter, or that's part of the design, we can easily expand the system to meet my needs as I get my beautiful new Tesla, which can suck in even more energy and drive too fast. Go 0 to 60 in like 2 or 3 seconds, who knows? But that'll take a lot of sunshine to shoot that car from 0 to 60 in 3 seconds. But if we get the panels, we can do it. So this is the liability insurance saying that you guys are insured, and this explains we've already talked about all of this stuff.
Yep.
I don't know if there's anything else we're missing here. I think it works pretty well. Now the ground mount scenario didn't seem like it added as much cost as I was expecting. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's an interesting kind of trade-off. Obviously working up on a roof, especially a roof like yours, if it's got a severe pitch, that just adds a lot of time. There's safety issues. The installers are going to move slower up there. Now on the ground, yeah, we do have some excavating and some trenching and things to do. But as far as the installation of the panels goes, they're working off of either the ground or maybe a 6 or 8 foot ladder, and they're not worried about falling off of a roof or having to install safety harnesses and things like that. So it really kind of balances out when you factor all that stuff in. So yeah, we don't really experience too much of upcharge. Obviously, if you're going to be 300-400 feet away from the interconnection point, the added trenching and wiring that's going to have to go underground is going to add to it. But yours is relatively close to the home.
Yeah, that's not 300 feet, that's for sure.
Right.
What would this actually look like? That picture you had in your presentation earlier showed a pretty large array, all cranked to 35 degrees. I'm assuming this would be multiple rows individually at 35 degrees, or what would this look like?
No, most often it's a monolithic installation like the image I had, and we could go back there if you wanted. But typically we try to keep the nose or the lowest panel on the front there about 2 feet off the ground, and that's for snow. If we do get a lot of snow and some drifting, then it's going to keep the front of your array out of the snow, unless it's a really extreme case. And then with the size of the panels, and we go the most we can go is 4 tall, like you're seeing there in landscape. And then the back of that array is going to be about 11 feet off the ground at that 35-degree tilt. And then the footprint of it is roughly, because of the developed length with the angle, the footprint of it's going to be about 10 feet deep. That would be actually underneath the array. But no, I know that that image is maybe a little deceiving, but those panels would be a ½ an inch apart on the racking system when it's installed. So there's really,
and it would be 11 feet on the back end of my property, and then 2 feet from the ground to the front. And I had a question like how you'd run the lawnmower around it, but it sounds like it's all one racking system. I envisioned individual rows, like I see like at the government solar project that they're doing, in Yorkville. But that's not it. You never install it that way. It's less cost effective, or?
Well, if we were to do that, what the problem, most of those, like the one you're talking about in Yorkville or a lot of the other bigger ones, they are usually maybe 2 panels wide, but they're also employing at least single axis tracking to where those panels are going to tilt and follow the sun. So they don't have as much of a problem with inter-row shading. Whereas if you were to have a row of panels, you would have to allow maybe a 3 or 4 foot gap so that you don't have the front panel shading the back panel, creating production problems. So the footprint of that array would probably almost triple if you were to do individual rows to avoid any inner row shading.
Or you have to pay a lot more to get the oscillating, or what's the word you use?
Single axis or dual axis tracker.
Tracking.
Yeah, the tracking. And that's another point of failure, right?
Yeah, Anthony,
yeah,
I'm
any
just
moving
looking.
parts, right? It is definitely a point of failure.
I'm just looking at the design. I took another look at your design specifically this morning and put some panels up on the roof and less on the ground, just assuming we could do that. And it sounded to be kind of the preference you had. There were 20 panels on the ground in the new design, and I can tell you it's 28 by 15, 28 feet wide by 15 feet deep.
Okay. I mean, honestly, if there isn't a price difference, I would almost rather keep them all in the backyard, just to keep, because I just got a new roof and it does look kind of nice. But if I had a nice southern facing roof that had spaceport, or up this side, I'm sorry, I would definitely put them on the roof that kind of integrated in. But it would just look, I don't know. I have to figure that out. But to me, if this tree goes away, and I'm okay, I can't go any more than 4, but I can go a little bit wider, so I can maybe fit another row of panels here or whatever. We can move this whole thing up closer to where my swimming pool is, or something. But just need to see what the shading is like at this house in the late afternoon.
Well, and clearly it's not a whole big difference, but we can save on the number of panels if we go all ground mount, just because the fact is we can have it at a perfect angle and a perfect directional facing south. Right.
Yeah, and then have you ever, this is a crazy question that just occurred to me, but as far as if I ever decided to move, could I pick up my whole array and put it on a flatbed trailer and move it to a new location if it was ground mount?
Yeah, that is a crazy question. But yeah, can you do it? Yeah, but will the expense of that outweigh just doing it fresh and recouping more incentives and all that kind of stuff? I don't think it would be worth it.
Right. Devaluing the house because you've got the next owner you would assume would be attracted to that part of the property. So great. I think this about answers it. What have I not asked that people should ask? I know I asked probably way more than most people, but
how long does it take to get the systems installed?
Yeah, how long does it take?
Literally, I tell people to plan anywhere from 8 to 10 weeks from signing of agreements to the system going live. Every municipality is a little different in terms of how long they take for permitting and those kind of things. Lately, we're seeing somewhere around 9 weeks on a typical installation, but 8 to 10 weeks is a fair number to expect from when you actually sign the agreement to go forward to actually having a system that's in and operational.
And as far as getting this in this year, so we're really looking at the edge of it. And if it does go down to 22%, my 7,500 here probably drops to what, 6,000 or something like that, 6,500. I don't know, something. It's probably going to cost $1,000.
100 times 22, 63.36.
63.36. So it would be about $1,000. But then again, we may be able to get more efficient panels or something next year too, or there may be other upsides. I still think this tariff thing is going to have an impact, but you guys are experts and you say probably maybe not. But either way, it's and again, $1,000 out of the whole cost of this thing, or added to the cost of this thing, basically just equals one more year until I get my payoff, right? It's
correct.
And then instead of getting $23,000 or $24,000 roughly, worst case scenario here, minus 10 for the original cost. So instead of getting 14,000, I'm getting 13,000. It's still money in the pocket. You're still money ahead, even if your lobbyists aren't successful in extending the 26 or getting it back to 30 and it goes to 21 as is in the law. It's not the end of the world.
I think the biggest obstacle you've got is just the lack of an approval to put them in. Well, if you're going to do ground mount, that really isn't the case.
Right. So I could
do that from
forward.
The beginning, and yeah. I'm telling people we're about 3 weeks away from D-date for not being able to be sure you're going to be able to get the systems in. So somewhere around the middle of October.
Got it. And then as far as this, let's say I wanted to, this was the size of the system that had to be to meet the 10 kilowatt hours, but I had anticipated just adding some panels at a later date. Could you make the racking system on one more panel wide? here to go, because you can't go any deeper, but I could go wider as long as this tree wasn't providing a shading problem, and I got rid of this damaged apple tree here. You could
Yeah,
just
right.
build the racking and not put the panels in, and then come back the following year and put those additional panels in place.
Yes, that is absolutely possible.
And you, in designing your system, you and I actually talked about that. That's why I've gone with the end-phase microinverters in the design, because going back to Norm's presentation, it's just a whole lot easier to expand the systems using the microinverters than with the inverter and optimizer approach.
Got it. Okay, great. I think that answers most of my questions. This is an exciting idea, and probably need to do a deep dive with you guys offline as far as the numbers and making all this sense and make sense. But I really appreciate you guys taking the time out, and hopefully this is useful to other people. I'll be promoting it on Facebook and putting it on my YouTube channel. Last couple of questions. So who else in the area is doing this? And not to talk bad about them, but what other kind of options do people have for this? I've seen there's a couple other companies, but I don't think anyone's closer to Newark or Kendall County than you guys.
No, not that we're aware of. Most, like a lot of things, right, in our area, they're more to the east. Population density is where people tend to set up shop and focus their attention. But the one thing that, especially the SREC program, certainly has driven a lot more contractors to Illinois than there were before the SREC program. We got a lot of national firms that came in, and still some independents that are out there as well. I know of a few up in the Lisle area and Naperville and things like that, and they'll come out this way as well. There's no, if you were to go out for bid and things like that, I think there's plenty of people that are going to give you a look as what's going on. And I would caution your listeners and watchers that one of the major barriers to people installing solar is confusion caused between companies when they present their quotes. It's not like going to a car dealership and saying, I want this option, this option, this option, this color, and 4 wheels, and you go down the road and you want the exact same thing. Every contractor is going to come in maybe with a slightly different design thought. They're going to use this panel versus that panel, and in the way they present, the way the incentives work out and things, let alone their baseline pricing. And if you get 2 or 3 of those in front of you and you're not familiar with the language and know what you're looking at, very quickly you can say, well, you know what, who's telling the truth or what's going on? So be cautious, ask a lot of questions. If there are discrepancies between the bid, we enjoy, even if we don't get the deal, we enjoy seeing other quotes so that we can walk people through and do a comparison and contrast what means what, to make sure that the customer is getting the best deal possible.
Great. And then as far as being competitive, what do you see that you do and don't like about other quotes or other installs out there? Some people that you don't have to name exact companies, but what kind of things you see people that are doing well? What kind of things you see that you don't really like? And then how do you guys usually fit in? I'd imagine with anything, you deal with local people, especially that have been established and around for a while. That's always my preference. And especially from a service perspective, like we talked about earlier, the inverter's flaking out or whatever, you guys will see it, and you guys are easy to get a hold of and talk to, and you're just down the road. But what do you see that you like and don't like with other quotes or other systems you guys have seen out there?
Ray, I'll jump in first with mine. Is you did kind of touch on that. There are a lot of companies that come in and they're strictly sales, and then they will subcontract out everything from there. So when you buy that system from company X, you don't know who's going to be there doing the work and who's going to be installing it and who's going to service it. And then 5 years from now, where is company X? Did they leave the area because the incentives dried up and they're nowhere to be found, or they completely gone? So, a lot of solar, especially in hot areas like Illinois, is like the Wild West. People are coming and going, so you want to be sure that you're tied into somebody that's there for the long run.
Got it, Ray.
I would just say, from my point of view, the biggest frustration that I have and that I see goes back to what Norm alluded to earlier, and that's that you can see from our approach, Anthony, we tend to want to put it all out there for people to have a look at and understand. And I see a lot of quotes provided to people that don't include the key information that they need in order to make sure that they're comparing apples to apples. It's like the incentive income. People will tell them the incentive income is going to be one amount, and then they don't bother to tell them, oh, by the way, there's a $100 application fee, a 5% bond fee, additional collateral that you have to post. And I didn't factor any of that into the money. So you're not going to really get what I told you you're going to get. You're going to get what I told you less all those dollars. I've seen everything as much as a 5% increase per year in utility rates, which makes the 25-year savings look fantastic, but they're never going to happen. So I think that's the frustration I have, is just different approaches to trying to help people figure out where they're going and to give them a realistic view of what it's going to cost, what it's going to take, and what they can expect to save.
Yeah, and to Norm's point about the salespeople, I mean, I've actually met, or I've seen people all over the place. Oh, ask me about my solar company, you know, and they're young people in their early 20s that obviously maybe they like solar and they're advocates, but they're just a front end to make that sale, and it just goes into some conglomerate network that bids everything out. That person you're not going to be dealing with if you have a problem later on down the road, for sure. So great.
Yeah. You know, I went through an exercise not long ago and looked at some quotes for a customer, and literally their salesperson put panels on the northeast facing roof.
Oh, wow.
Which, you know, it's like, we don't see how you can actually do that and have it expect to produce what you need to produce to make it worth the money. And
got it. Cool. Any closing thoughts from you guys?
No, just a big thank you. Really appreciate it. Oh, you know, as this works directly into our kind of education-based mindset and making people helping people get all the right information in order to make a good decision.
Great. Yeah.
I would say the closing thought on my end, Anthony, is that solar energy in Illinois is the best kept secret that there is. And if people really would take the time to look at it, they would see that it really makes sense from an economic point of view, from an environmental point of view. And it doesn't cost them anything to have an analysis done. We will do everything for them, like we've done for you here in your quote. And there's no charge associated with that.
I haven't paid you guys a penny.
They can make their decisions.
Right. No, that's great. And I'm, you know, in trying to get into government and try to find these win-wins, they're so rare, right? Where you can help the environment, you can save money, all of these things. And that's why I'm so excited about solar in general at all the different levels that it's available to. And again, if you're in if you've got the right house, or you know, or you've got some backyard that you don't mind put some panels in or whatever, you can make it happen. And with a decent credit history, or just some spare change, or a willingness to take on a loan. So I really appreciate it, guys. I'll follow up with email, and we can talk more about thinking about the pros and cons moving forward with this one, and also let you know with what I find out from the Village of Newark as far as getting that code changed, so Chris can move forward with his plans too.
I'll get to work on changing those panels back to all on the ground, and be in touch.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you, Anthony. Great speaking with you.
Thank you.
Yep, thanks.